Hey everybody, it's Chris, and a topic that came up right after the 2024 Player's Handbook came out, and I've seen it come up a lot more recently, is the interaction between opportunity attacks and the Warcaster feat and allies moving out of your reach. Jeremy from the Insight Check channel just did a video kind of covering all the arguments why it works and all the arguments why it doesn't work, and then weighing in with his own opinion on it. And I've watched this video and I want to react to it. I haven't done a reaction in a while, and this video is being done with Jeremy's permission. But I will also point out that his original video is in my video description. Go check it out. I think he does a good job covering the arguments, though I do have some disagreements with his final conclusions that I will get into. But let's get started on his introduction to this video. I'll be stopping it a few times to intersect with some of my opinions, and there's a certain part that we're going to skip, and I'm just going to kind of summarize. All right, so let's get started.
There's an age-old question that's been burning since the long-forgotten year of 2024, and that question is, of course, can allies provoke opportunity attacks? Now, you might be wondering why this even matters. Why would you ever want to attack one of your allies? And there's a very simple answer to that: the Warcaster feat. Now, again, you might be wondering, what exactly does that do? I haven't memorized every word of the Player's Handbook, and fear not, I've got you. Let's go over the nuance of this in excruciating detail in something of a return to form for me. Before we get too into it though, I'll pose a question to you right now, so let me know in the comments. In the 2024 rules, do you think that you can provoke opportunity attacks against your allies? Also, I am quickly approaching the insane milestone of 20,000 subscribers thanks to all of you, so if you'd like to help me on my quest to get there, clicking the subscribe button and liking the video while you're there helps a lot more than you probably realize, so thank you. Just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, let's discuss why this matters. If you're able to opportunity attack allies, and if you have access to the Warcaster feat, then you could, in theory, cast a spell on an ally to heal or buff them as they run by you. This is of particular note because, for reasons we will get to very shortly, you explicitly could not do this under the 2014 rules, with some exceptions.
So I'm going to stop it right there because that is the question. Can you use the Warcaster feat to replace an opportunity attack provoked by an ally to reaction cast a spell on them? Something like Polymorph, or Haste, or Cure Wounds. Or does an ally even provoke an opportunity attack when it leaves your reach? Now, there might be a benefit to just making an opportunity attack against an ally rather than casting a spell at them, because maybe you use Unarmed Strike and then you replace your Unarmed Strike, or of the Unarmed Strike options, you choose Shove, and then you push them 5 feet, and so basically they get an additional 5 feet to their movement. But the main discussion here isn't about that interaction. The main discussion revolves around the Warcaster feat and using the opportunity attack to cast a spell as a reaction on an ally. This allows the spellcaster to cast certain spells that are normally an action as a reaction, and since the reaction won't be on their turn, there's no worry about activating the rule about spending multiple spell slots in a single turn. Now, Warcaster does this anyway. If an enemy provokes an opportunity attack from you and you have Warcaster, there's no question that you can use your reaction to cast an action spell at that enemy. We're only talking about, does this also extend to allies? And this is a topic that Jeremy and I and other colleagues discussed recently, and it was a passionate discussion, and we all came out with different positions on it, and in some cases fairly different positions on it, and so I wasn't particularly surprised to see this video today, and that's part of the reason I wanted to weigh in on it, because although I think Jeremy does a great job in this video of breaking down the reasons why this interaction potentially works and why this interaction potentially doesn't work, his ending position on it is one I don't fully agree with, and I do want to add in my own take to that. Now, one thing Jeremy just pointed out was that the 2014 rules explicitly didn't allow this. And I wanted to dig into that just a little bit deeper than he did, because I think if we are considering whether this is intentional or not, and I do think that's a different question, whether it's intentional or not, and whether it works or not, and whether you should or shouldn't use the interaction at your table are 3 different questions, and they won't necessarily have the same answers. But here is the 2014 Player's Handbook rule for opportunity attacks, putting it up on your screen. You can make an opportunity attack when a hostile creature that you can see moves out of your reach. So, assuming your ally isn't hostile to you, then they don't provoke opportunity attacks. Here's the 2024 wording. You can make an opportunity attack when a creature you can see leaves your reach using its action, its reaction, or one of its speeds. So the part of the text that says, quote, you make an opportunity attack when a hostile creature was transferred over to the 2024 rules. They transferred it word for word, like they cut and pasted, except they removed the word hostile. Now, the argument from the side that says that this interaction doesn't work is that hostile wasn't removed because they wanted to change who the opportunity attacks could work on. They removed it to save space. There's a lot of removing of unnecessary wording in the new Player's Handbook, so they saw hostile there and they removed it to save a word. Now, if I was on the design team and I wanted opportunity attacks to work on anyone who left a character's reach, then what you see there is how I would have worded it. If I was on the design team and I wanted it to work on only enemies, but I was asked to remove a word for space, then the way I would have worded it is, you can make an opportunity attack when an enemy that you can see leaves your reach using its action, reaction, blah, blah, blah. And as Jeremy points out later in this video, enemy is a defined word in the rules. So this wording change would leave no ambiguity at all while still reducing the word count. In fact, it would actually reduce the character count even a little bit more. Now, that doesn't mean this was intentional or that the intention was that you could do opportunity attacks on allies, because it could have been a mistake. It could have been an oversight. But it definitely makes me think that it's possible that it was intentional. Now I'm going to play the next bit, and then we're going to skip a bit.
So with that, let's get into the nitty gritty. But also, we need an important disclaimer because as it turns out, this topic is way more controversial than I'd realized. As I write this, a couple of days ago, I had posted a poll asking about the interaction, and right now with over 1,600 votes, the poll is still perfectly split at 50-50. I've never had one like this before. So, the intent of this video is to cover both sides of the discussion first. I do have my own thoughts about how it works and why I believe it to be the case, which I will go over toward the end. I want to be clear though, that this video is way more about the discussion and not about being right. I'm not dying on any hills here, except one, but we'll get to that later too. So, with that in mind, let's just remember that this is a make-believe game, and if you disagree with anything, that's okay. It's part of the fun of the game. I like to get unnecessarily deep on silly topics like this to see what we can learn. Please do whatever is best for you and your table. I'm not here to tell you otherwise.
Okay, going to stop there because Jeremy raises 2 very important points here. The first is he posted a poll on his channel, and his viewers responded pretty much evenly split on whether they thought that the interaction worked or didn't work. Now, if I ran the poll on my channel, I might get different results. If different YouTubers ran it on their channels, they might get different results. And if you ran it not on YouTube, you might get different results again. But what it does tell me is there's a number of players that think that the interaction works and is supposed to work. And there are a number of people who think that the interaction doesn't work and isn't supposed to work. And whether that's actually 50-50 across the board or just with Jeremy's viewers, I'm not sure. But certainly, I think it's reasonable to assume that there's significant amounts on both sides. The second thing he points out is that whatever is working for you and your table right now, you should keep doing it. I think that's a really important point because I'm not sure he's consistent with that point, and I'm going to circle back to that later on. Okay, so through the next part of this video and most of the video, what Jeremy is doing is he's breaking down all the main arguments why the interaction works and all the main arguments why the interaction doesn't work. And I am going to give you an abbreviated version, but I am linking his video in the video description. So if you are interested in this topic, I highly recommend it, as I think he does a very good job at breaking down the main points I've heard. So here's a quick version. Opportunity attacks are defined in 2 places in the player's handbook, in Chapter 1 and again in the rules glossary. Chapter 1, which is the bit you see up on your screen right now, there are 2 introductory sentences to opportunity attacks that talk about enemies dropping their guard and moving past your foes. Since these sentences are intended to be restrictive, then you don't need to specify enemies later in the definition, because that parameter was already set. So it doesn't work. On the other hand, what you'll see up on your screen right now is the rules glossary entry on opportunity attacks, and you'll notice it doesn't include those 2 introductory sentences, which would suggest that they're not part of the rule, that they are intended to be descriptive, explaining what opportunity attacks are, not how they work. So it does work. But up on your screen right now, this is from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it includes a section on rules exploits that says that a DM shouldn't let players attack each other or helpless creatures. So it doesn't work. Though, if we read this whole thing, we'll see that that's taking this advice out of context, since it's specifically referring to activating rules that are supposed to apply only during combat while out of combat. So it does work. And this is less about whether it does or doesn't work and more about whether it should or shouldn't work. But Warcaster is already a good feat, and spellcasters are already powerful enough, so giving them another tool is way too much, so it shouldn't work. And that's the condensed version of the meat of the video. So, like I said, if you want his full analysis, which is better than what I just gave you, check out the link in the video description. But in order to provide my take, I think that's enough context. So, we're going to move on in his video.
Now, if you hadn't already figured it out, I will reveal my bias here. But I will also provide an important qualifier. In my opinion, I believe that this interaction works as written. I don't even think it's particularly problematic, as I will explain in a bit. But, regardless of that, I still think it's bad design that only serves to further push spellcasters into higher levels of power as compared to their martial counterparts. A martial character gets to make a singular melee weapon attack, whereas a spellcaster can do that, cast spells to both harm and enemies, and buff allies, and it still has their turn available to them. By no means do I think that this is the thing that's sending casters over the top, but it's just yet another option available to them. To reiterate, on a functional level, I don't think this is a problem. Utilizing this necessitates quite a few steps. It requires that you took the feat over something else, that you have your reaction available, that you have the requisite spell slot available for what you want to cast, you have the appropriate spell prepared, an ally is able to use their movement in a way that allows them to run through your melee range and not impede the rest of their turn. It's a lot of steps for what, yes, does amount to a lot of potential power, but it also means that that same caster isn't going to be using shield or absorb elements or counterspell or any other reaction that also might be useful. And in many situations, they're still consuming a spell slot. Despite all of that, I still think it's very dangerous design. Why worry about whether or not you can polymorph or fireball when you can just do both in the same round? And it's particularly dangerous during the first round of combat, when players are likely to be closer together, so needing to move through an ally's melee range is less likely to be a problem. It also requires that any new one-action cast spells also consider this interaction, which can serve to limit design space. So while I might like the interaction and think that it works, I also think that it's potentially bad design. Because, like I always say, 2 things can be true.
All right, gonna stop there because I disagree with him. With 2 points he's made here. The first is he says he thinks it works. I'm not sure it works. I think if it clearly worked, he wouldn't be getting an even split on that poll. And I think if it clearly worked, he wouldn't be able to spend half of the chunk of the video analyzing it with reasons it doesn't work. So I'm not sure it works, and I'm not sure it doesn't work. I am very conflicted on that. I think there are very, very solid arguments on both sides. And secondly, he talks about it being too powerful and bad design. Yes, the martial caster divide can be an issue, but not because spellcasters are buffing the marshals. In my opinion, at least, the marshal-caster divide is a problem when a spellcaster can use spells to steal the limelight from marshals. Buffing allies isn't the problem. It's never been the problem. In fact, if buffing allies with spells was better than spells that disable the enemy, I don't think we would even talk about the marshal-caster divide. Buffing allies is teamwork, not something to be discouraged at the table, and things that enable it are not bad design, in my opinion. But let's move on.
So now for the qualifier. I said I believe this interaction was both valid and intentional, even if I simultaneously think it's bad design. That said, I will happily be wrong about this. I'm not dying on a hill here. Again, while I believe this interaction works and was intentional, I'm not saying that this is definitively how it is and how you should run it at your table. I'm like 60-40 at best here. To me, it just feels like based on the preponderance of evidence, it just feels too intentional. This is especially the case since much of what we have seen in favor of it comes directly from the book, and much of what's against it is largely a meta justification or requires ignoring the word creatures or just assuming it's a mistake. I'll double down here. While I think the interaction is okay, I honestly don't particularly care either way. Truthfully, I just want an errata or some kind of clarification to make it abundantly clear whether this works or not, and if it happens that it doesn't work, that's totally cool.
All right, I got to stop there. So Jeremy thinks it works, but it's bad design and it's too powerful, and what he also says is, I would like errata or a clarification on this to know whether it works or not. And I'm going to come back to this because this is my biggest disagreement with him.
Until then, or honestly even after that, do whatever works for you and your table. The final thing I wanted to address here is something that I've seen come up quite a lot during the discussions of this interaction and even popped up a few times in the comments of the poll. The assertion that thinking this interaction works is bad faith. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that while I'm not dying on any hills in regard to my stance on the interaction, there is one hill that I am willing to die on, and this is it. There is nothing even remotely bad faith about believing this interaction to work. It's not an exploit. It involves no creative wording or interpretations at all. It's just seeing that the word creature is used in the rule for opportunity attacks and using the ordinary definition of that word as defined in the very same book. The only difference is that it creates what many perceive to be a very powerful interaction, and as a result, they don't like it and just want a justification to not allow it. The thing is though, if you don't like the interaction, just explicitly rule that it doesn't work at your table. I've seen this interaction occur in-game and have discussed it with many that do use it, including Trademonk, and they all currently have never experienced any issues with it. While I did acknowledge that it feels like bad design, I also have to say that it does create some interesting options for teamwork and gives players new ways to think about encounters, which I have to say is cool and I do appreciate it. I just also think that it's unnecessary and doesn't need to exist. Incidentally, I think that saying that something is definitively bad faith is in itself bad faith. Those who often label things this way and point to the section in the DMG often forget the very next line that says, "The rules assume that everyone reading and interpreting the rules has the interest of the group's fun at heart and is reading the rules in that light." If everyone at the table discusses this interaction, or any other one for that matter, and are okay with it and enjoy what it brings to the game, it is not bad faith. Honestly, the fact that the poll is even as split as it is just goes to show how many people believe that this interaction is completely legitimate, and almost on its own makes it not bad faith. I could go on a whole video long rant about this discussion specifically, but we'll cut it here for now. What is or isn't bad faith is almost always a table-by-table decision, and not one that should be settled by the internet at large. So with all that, let me know your thoughts about opportunity attacks, Warcaster, and how you think it all interacts. I'm sure this is going to be a spicy one.
All right, that's the end of the video. I just thought I wanted to let him get his part off about accusing people of bad faith, because I think that's a good point to bring up. Often when we disagree with people, suddenly you're reading in bad faith comes up, or this is a bad faith argument comes up, and sometimes that's true. I don't think that's the case here. I think there are very legitimate arguments on both sides as to why this works or why it doesn't work. So I don't think anyone's arguing in bad faith, or maybe some people are, but the majority of people are not. So I just don't think that holds any water. And I wanted to let Jeremy say his point on that because I thought that was a good point. But I do want to repeat that Jeremy thinks this needs errata or clarification, but you should do what works at your table, which to me is inconsistent. So here's my take. I don't know if this interaction is intentional or not intentional. I pointed out one reason earlier why it might be intentional, but honestly, if I was pinned down to guessing, my guess is the designers weren't even considering the possibility of using opportunity attacks with allies via the Warcaster feat. So whether they used the word enemy or they used the word creature, in their minds probably made no difference at all. That's purely a guess on my part, but I do think it is plausible, even probable, that the designers just had an oversight here. These kinds of oversights are harder to avoid than you might think, and they're not exclusive to D&D. So this isn't about the D&D designers. This is about game design in general. And when you have a game like D&D, it's complicated. And, we're talking about hundreds of pages of rules. Having everything work together exactly as you intended is just not going to happen. As for whether it works or not, again, I am split. Jeremy says it works, and I'm in the it might work camp. The reasons why the interaction works are good. The reason why the interactions don't work are also good. So I'm just not in either camp there. Here is where I disagree with Jeremy most strongly. He says he would like an errata or clarification as to whether it works or not. And that seems like the most reasonable thing in the world to say. But I'm going to circle back to the start of the video. This is not a new discussion. This potential interaction was identified right after the Player's Handbook came out. That was almost a year ago. And I saw it talked about all over the place. So this, I don't know if it's common knowledge at casual tables, but for people who are in the community and, they read Reddit posts and they post on social media and they watch YouTube, they knew about it. They've known about it for a long, long time. And we have an even split on that poll, which suggests to me we've had tables using this interaction and tables that have decided not to use this interaction for up to nearly a year now. And in most cases are probably fine with the decision they made. And if they aren't, then they change their minds. And there are probably a ton of tables that haven't even considered the interaction, so they don't need a clarification because there's never been confusion. And personally, I joined 2 long-running campaigns right after the Player's Handbook came out, and in both groups, this interaction was discussed before we ever made our characters. And in both groups, we decided, why not try it out? With the provision that we will ban it if it ever becomes a problem. And I also run several games every month, and I allow the interaction. And to date, I have never seen a combat-defining moment with this interaction. There's simply not as many spells that work with it as you might think, and the spells that do work with it often sound better casting as a reaction than they are, and casting as a reaction rather than an action also sounds better than it is. For the most part, I see reaction cure wounds, and honestly, I have never experienced a case where it made the game less fun or worse. Though, I don't think it adds a lot either. If I joined a campaign tomorrow and was asked to weigh in on whether we should play with this interaction or not, my vote would be, don't care. I don't care either way. But Jeremy says, do what works for your table. And if it's fun for you, then you should keep doing it. Which is why I think that's the only clarification we would need from the designers. We don't even need that. If you have chosen to ban the interaction, great. But you don't need errata. You're already playing the way you want. If you have chosen to use the interaction, you don't need the designer's permission. You're already playing the way you want. If the designers come down on this with anything, but tables should keep doing what they're doing now, then they're interfering with the rules understandings between players and DMs that already exist and have existed since the Player's Handbook came out. If this was an interaction we discovered last week, that might be different. But I don't need the designers telling me that I've been playing D&D wrong for the last year, or that I've been playing D&D right for the last year. I already know. And if your table plays differently than me, I don't want the designers telling you you're playing wrong either. For players that are aware of this interaction and know about this discussion, let those players decide for themselves whether they want to use it or not. For those players that don't, well, ignorance is probably bliss. So once again, if I was putting myself in the designer's shoes, regardless of whether this was intentional or not, I don't think whether it was intentional or not even matters. We have tables playing with this and they're happy. We have tables not playing with this and they're happy. If I come in and say, you're right and you're wrong, then what I'm doing is I'm removing fun from some of those tables. And I think that's bad. I don't think designers should do that. So I think they should just leave it as is. They could acknowledge that the debate exists. They could say that, the intention was that it doesn't work, but the rules possibly permit it, and either way is okay. That would be fine. But I think that's as far as they should go. But you let me know what you think the designer should say in the comments down below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.